Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. And of course, later on in the podcast, we'll have our weekly conversation with Andrew Malcolm, the regent of RedState.com, the prince of Twitter, joins us to discuss all sorts of different topics, including the media bias that's still going on in terms of the Hunter Biden story. We talk about his latest and greatest at Red State. You got to check that out as well. We'll talk about Joe Biden. We talk about all sorts of different fun things. But first, the top story today is clearly the raid on Donald Trump's residence at Mar-a-Lago by the FBI and the Department of Justice. This broke last night. It's unprecedented in American history. We've never had the Department of Justice or any federal agency raid a former president's house. We've never actually even had them conduct a raid on somebody who is clearly one of the front runners to run against the current president, somebody from the opposite political party. This raises all sorts of questions. One is that the Department of Justice had to know just how unprecedented this was. Attorney General Merrick Garland had to have signed off on this. Christopher Wray at the FBI had to have signed off on this. So the question becomes, what is it that they were looking for? Because the initial reports that this is about document retention just simply doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, it's certainly, we have the Presidential Records Act. There's been a lot of accusations that Donald Trump has violated that. The National Archives have been in a tussle with him ever since he left office over documents that he had. They handed over some documents in February, and Trump was still continuing to work with the National Archives and the Department of Justice, apparently, at least according to the Miami Herald this morning, on determining whether or not he needed to release any more of the records that he retained at Mar-a-Lago. They put a padlock on it. They increased security around it while this was going on. The Miami Herald said that the FBI used this as a predicate, the cooperation as a predicate to get the search warrant. So this is the same type of complaint that the Department of Justice refused to pursue when it came to Hillary Clinton. I mean, we were just talking about this 6 years ago. 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago to the day, James Comey got up and said, well, we're not going to prosecute Hillary Clinton for any crimes related to her mishandling of classified information. Okay, that sounds like a precedent to me, because she was a political candidate at the time. She was a candidate for president. She was former Secretary of State. She didn't even really have technically the plenary declassification authority while she was in office that she could have used to argue that that she could make the decision on whether or not to keep this material on her server, which she was using to transmit. I mean, as illegal as it may or may not have been for Trump to keep those records, he wasn't transmitting them anywhere. They weren't on a server. They weren't on a private server that was unsecured and that was operating basically to evade not just the Presidential Record Act, which wouldn't have applied to Hillary Clinton, but other record retention acts, plus some very clear statutes about the mishandling of classified information. So if it's not that, and Andy McCarthy, I write about this later on in the post. I have a series of posts on this today. Ron DeSantis weighed in, Glenn Youngkin weighed in. I want to talk about Glenn Youngkin in just a moment. But Andy McCarthy, when I talked to in the Glenn Youngkin post, Andy McCarthy argues that there's just simply no way that this is about document retention. This is a predicate to have with something to do with January 6th. Now, Andy's a former federal prosecutor. We've interviewed him here many, many, many times. He's a great guy. He's very insightful. He understands how the Department of Justice works. And he thinks that they're working on a different case, and they use this as a predicate to do a complete search to try to tie Trump to the violence of January 6th. And he also kind of thinks that that's a stretch, too. And I think that that might be a big stretch, and that they are really going to open themselves up for massive charges of politicization if they don't actually deliver anything out of this search, anything of use out of this search. If all that comes up out of this is the type of document issues that the Department of Justice refused to hold Hillary Clinton accountable for, that is going to be seen as massively political and maybe fatal to the structure of the Department of Justice and the FBI. Because once Republicans take control of Washington, and they're eventually going to, They're going to go after the DOJ and the FBI very hard on this. They're already inclined to do so based on other politicizations that have taken place. Notably, as Glenn Youngkin pointed out, the attempt to paint parents objecting at school board meetings as domestic terrorists, and then the refusal to enforce the clear federal law against demonstrating at the homes or offices of federal judges after the leak of the Dobbs decision was made, and the demonstrations that took place in front of the justices' houses, the Supreme Court justices' houses. Merrick Garland refused to enforce that law. Larry Hogan in Maryland, Youngkin again in Virginia were demanding enforcement of this. Garland eventually sent U.S. Marshals out to protect the justices, but did nothing about the demonstrations. And as far as I know, those demonstrations are continuing, and they're continuing to do nothing about it. So they're already opened up for politicization, and I think Youngkin actually makes the better case today. Ron DeSantis responded immediately last night by saying that this was just another example of the regime's weaponization of the federal agencies. Now, I think that that's getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit. We do still have to wait and see what the Department of Justice is up to. It may be that they have a big criminal case that's going to come down that's, established and provable against Donald Trump, in which case this raid would make some sense. And I think it's important that we don't all just jump to one particular conclusion, but leave room for that. However, they'd better make that explanation pretty quickly. I mean within days. Because if this thing stretches out weeks or months, it's going to make it look as though they're trying to backfill against the unprecedented intrusion in electoral politics that this represents. Especially, why do you do this 3 months ahead of the midterms? I mean, if you have this case, maybe you execute this thing in May or April, or maybe you wait until mid-November to do it when it isn't going to involve the midterm cycle. So all of these are good questions. And we've got a lot of interest on this on the reader pages. Clearly, it's the topic of the day. It's the story of the day. There's probably nothing that's really going to vie against it today. Jazz, however, has a good post up about a tip poll, IBD tip poll, about the majority worried about Joe Biden's mental health. And not the first time we've seen that either. But be sure to read that. And All Up Pundit has something coming up about the recent polling on the midterms for congressional races, and that the GOP's internal polls show them that they're actually being competitive in D+ double-digit districts. I suspect that this is at least initially going to boost those prospects, because people are going to look at this and say, this is an administration that's obsessing over Donald Trump, and especially if they don't deliver the goods. I mean, they're flirting with a backfire of historic proportions here. And I suspect that Republicans are already cutting the ads. I think Donald Trump, in fact, Karen Townsend has a post coming up at 2 Eastern time talking about an ad that Donald Trump has already cut about the raid. It won't be the last. And I think you're going to see a lot of Republicans going very public about their unhappiness over this. Kevin McCarthy says he's going to hold a full-scale investigation once Republicans return to the majority in the House. I think you're going to see this drill down very rapidly, and perhaps in the same manner that Nancy Pelosi constructed the Select Committee on January 6th, which is to say, an extremely one-sided committee to handle it. This is what happens when you set precedents, is that people follow the precedents. We'll see. I still want to say that we should keep our powder dry until we see what the Department of Justice has to say about this. But I got to tell you, that was a bombshell last night, and bombshells sometimes explode in unexpected directions. And I suspect that everybody's predicting and nobody's quite sure what's happening yet. Only Merrick Garland can know for sure what the intent here is, but he'd better have a really good explanation for this. All right, coming up next, Andrew Malcolm The regent of redstate.com, the prince of Twitter, joins us for our weekly Tuesdays with Andrew, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Great to be back with you on Tuesdays as always. We talk with Andrew Malcolm, the prince of Twitter, the regent of redstate.com, where he does some great work on VIP, both on in the spoken word as well as the written word. Andrew Malcolm at AH Malcolm on the Twitters is welcome back.
Thank you, Ed. It's good to be here with you.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about today, but we've got some bad news that just came across just as we were getting ready to do this, because we're both very big fans of Olivia Newton-John, who passed away after a very long battle with breast cancer at 73. In my mind, she's always going to be, 21 years old and, doing If Not For You and Please Mr. Please and all the wonderful, wonderful music that she did, the movies that she did. But when we talk about the music, talk about the movies at least, Andrew, you're insufficient in one movie. You revealed to me that you've never seen Grease.
I've seen bits of it. Those greaser movies never appealed to me, but it should have, because I loved Olivia Newton-John, and I'm sure that she loved me. We never met, but I fell in love with her when I saw Xanadu, which is you think was a terrible movie, and I think was just magic. With Gene Kelly singing and roller skating, it's
a very 1980 movie. I will say this. This is really like End Stage Disco. It was close to End Stage Disco, and it flopped. I mean, it was a big flop at the box office, but the music was really good. And I think this was just a script issue, right? Because the people who were in it were good. She was good. Gene Kelly is, of course, legendary. Oh gosh, I can't think of the male actor.
Neither can I. But
he was very much a 1970s, 1980s actor, and I can't think of his name now. But look, I mean, it was fun. It was supposed to be fluff. It was a musical. It was supposed to be fluff. And she didn't do a ton of movies after that. I think she did. Was it Two for the Road? I think with John Travolta as a follow up, and that didn't do well either. But of course, she made beautiful music before and after that.
Oh, the music! Oh, I just loved her music. But there was one song that we didn't mention of hers that. I guess I deleted it already. But there was. I forget which. Well, maybe it's in the. That's all right. We'll go ahead. I'll see if.
Well, there's tons of great songs. I mean, I just named the two right off the top of my head to start off with. But I mean, she was doing. I guess you could call it.
You're the one that I want. You're the one that.
Well, that was from Grease. You're the one that I want. It's from Grease. Yeah. Well, that was a duet with John Travolta, and I mean, let me tell you something. That summer, I was 15 years old that summer when Grease came out. And we were at the theater over and over and over again. I remember being in Lake Havasu, spending the summer with my cousins, like I usually did, Lake Havasu, Arizona. And, we had all of their friends, and we were out there, and we would go to the drive-in theater. We'd come back, and we would come back and put the record on the turntable, right? And we'd all sing along to the music and sort of act out some of the songs, and we knew that entire soundtrack by heart. Every single one of us did.
Yeah.
It was, and Grease it's also fluff. It's a musical. It's fluff. But it was an awful lot of fun. I remember it being kind of controversial, though. If you've never seen it, I mean, it was a stage play for years before they made a movie out of it. But the stage play was a little bit more. So I was a little bit more self-aware of the ridiculousness of casting, actors in their 30s into high school roles. It's supposed to be kind of the thing on stage. And the movie played it a little bit more straight, but he's sort of the greaser gang member. She's the innocent, she's the innocent normie. who falls in with the girl gang that's sort of the parallel to the boy gang. Have the little 1950s gang dance off and all this kind of stuff. And in the end, she decides that the real way to be herself and to get her man is to become a total slut, or at least act like it. And
that was not the real Olivia.
It was not the real Olivia Newton-John.
That I knew.
No, that was not the real Olivia Newton-John. One of my, I was telling Andrew before we went on the air, this was my very first adolescent celebrity crush was Olivia Newton-John. And I mean, it endured.
Yeah.
It endured until what time is it right now? Oh, she was such a lovely person, and
didn't deserve that long struggle. 1993, I think, was the diagnosis.
Yeah, she had a hard life. I mean, her husband disappeared at one point.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
One of her husbands disappeared while they were on vacation in Mexico. I think he never did reappear. I forget what the details on that. I mean, she did not have the easiest of lives, but she was always cheerful, always.
She said, I think 2017 that her breast cancer had returned and metastasized. So, but that's what, 9 more years of struggle after the first struggle. So,
yeah.
And then she was quite an eloquent and active advocate for breast cancer research.
Yep. And I think efforts that will not just continue, but be, amplified after her passing today. So just to offer, our love and affection to her and to her family and all of her friends.
And the wonderful memory of those good stories, which they endure. I mean,
they do.
We're all about memories and stories. Stories. I mean, the Bible is stories, right? I mean, it's just stories are what unites us. And some of the stories in modern times are more tawdry. And Brian Stelter brought one up.
Well, that's what we call in the business a segue. That's why Andrew is such a professional in this business, because he understands the art of the segue. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Brian Stelter. Now, Brian Stelter was on Reliable Sources yesterday. He was interviewing a Biden spokesman named Michael LaRosa, and I've got a post. By the time this goes up, the post will already be up at Hot Air. I've already written a post. It's going to go up a little bit after we get done discussing this. And so I'm going to access it really quickly just so I can make sure that I've got this, that I accurately quote Brian Stelter in this. They're talking about whether or not Joe Biden's going to run again in 2024, which is suddenly, a topic that you can discuss. His age is a topic you can discuss, but not just his age, Andrew. This is what Brian Stelter said to Michael LaRosa. Well, what about his son? What about Hunter? Hunter under federal investigation. Charges could be coming any time. This is not just a right-wing media story. This is a real problem for the Bidens. And I said, he's right. It's not just a right-wing media story now. It never was just a right-wing media story. It's just that Brian Stelter, along with the rest of his colleagues in the mainstream media, acted as though it was only a right-wing media story. I mean, the cojones on Stelter. I mean, that's...
Oh, yeah.
That's something else. I mean,
that's right. They're the size of potatoes. Yeah.
I knew you were going to work a potato reference in there, Andrew. I know what you did. I see what you did just there. Another way in which Andrew Malcolm is the consummate professional, but I mean, this is the reason why it's not a right-wing media story now is because the left-wing media wants Biden to get the hell out of office. I mean, he's a disaster, and they want to push him out for somebody else in 2024. So suddenly, we can now start talking about Hunter Biden and his laptop and his corruption.
Yeah. It's a terrible baggage, Ed. I don't know how he could possibly run again.
Right. Well, I don't know how he's going to run again when the mainstream media is throwing him under the bus. But I mean, A, it's always been a legitimate story. B, not just the mainstream media, but big tech conspired to suppress it. This is
Oh
probably
yeah.
the worst. I was just talking to Bob Bork Jr., in fact, about antitrust legislation. Completely different topic, right? But I brought this story up. I brought up the Hunter Biden thing because, and I said to him, this is the, by the way, that podcast is going to be tomorrow. It's a great conversation I have with Bob Bork, son of Robert Bork, the famous jurist who does great work on his own. Bob Bork Jr. does
And
great
by
work on his own.
tomorrow, you mean Tuesday?
No, by tomorrow, I actually mean Wednesday.
Oh,
It'll be
okay.
Wednesday's podcast. Your Tuesdays, man. Nobody bumps you out of Tuesdays. Nobody puts Andrew in the corner on
Yeah,
Tuesdays.
that's right.
It's a whole other
No
movie
matter,
reference. I don't know if
no
you've ever seen
matter,
Dirty
no,
Dancing,
ma-
but
no matter what Hunter said on his laptop about me,
yeah, well, you know, he says
I
a lot
own
of
Tuesdays.
he
Yeah,
said a lot of crazy things on his laptop, and suddenly it's now legitimate news. But I mean, this is part of this whole media narrative thing that really got out of control.
it did.
Don't you think that this was like the worst example of this? Was the
It
Hunter Biden
is.
laptop?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Of suppressing news, which a year and a half later, till the Washington Post and New York Times looked at it. They were on within minutes. They were on every mistruth or untruth that Donald Trump said, and counting it up into the thousands, allegedly.
Yeah.
And yet we have a sleazebag son of at the time, a man who wanted to be president, who then became president, with videos, naked videos, drug videos, prostitutes. I mean, the whole and the big guy narrative, selling influence with his family name all around the world. And it's all his. I mean, this wasn't made up by right-wing media. Right-wing media saw it and went, "Oh my God!"
Yeah. I mean, it was the New York Post. I mean, it's certainly
Yeah.
they're on the right. You know, they're on the right side of the spectrum, but it's still a news organization, and it was still news. I mean, Hunter Biden's, corruption involving Hunter Biden during Joe Biden's vice presidency should have been news in the 2020 cycle, and
Absolutely.
and CNN, where Brian Stelter is at, along with the Washington Post, the New York Times, and big tech conspired to paint that reporting as Russian disinformation, even though people who had been communicating with Hunter Biden in the emails that were reported by the New York Post went public and said, no, that's actually what was being emailed. I was part of that conversation, and that's legit. And you couldn't get a major news organization. NPR said we only pay attention to real news items, not fake news items. I mean,
well, there's a picture of Joe Biden who took Hunter and his granddaughter Finnegan to Beijing with him on Air Force Two on an official government visit, and he took Hunter there so that Hunter could consummate some business deals with Chinese business people that, of course, Joe Biden knew nothing about and never met with, and those pictures of him meeting with them had to be photoshopped, right, Ed?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, again, this is about narrative journalism, right? Now that Joe Biden is a liability for Democrats, everybody wants to dump him. And so now these media outlets are paying attention to Joe Biden because it benefits them to try to push him out of office. I mean, it's the worst of media, it's narrative journalism in both directions. And Stelter's at the center of that. Stelter's absolutely at the center of that.
I don't know how they sleep at night. I really don't. I guess they never were professional news people. As Don Serber pointed out, my God, this guy began in journalism in the days of hot type, and I did.
Well,
but back then there were scruples. I mean, you couldn't you couldn't be so biased as they have become. And I've said this before on our show. I don't know that our mainstream media, which I regard as important for our democracy's proper operation, I don't know that it can ever regain its credibility. It's just been years of tawdry distortion, and even worse, what's the word? Ignoring
Yeah.
ignoring things.
Silencing it. I mean,
Silencing,
it wasn't
yeah.
even ignoring it. I mean, with the actively silencing it. NPR making a big to-do about the fact that they weren't going to cover any part of that Hunter Biden story because it was beneath their dignity to cover it. I mean, just it's insane.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. It. I feel like I want to go take a shower now.
Well, I'm living in Central Texas, so I kind of feel that way anyway.
All the time.
It's warm. It's warm here. Somebody didn't tell me, Andrew, that it got hot in Central Texas. I feel like a CNN viewer who just realized that the Hunter Biden story was legit. Wait a minute, I wasn't told that was legit.
That's right. I thought Brian Stelter was it, what's the word? A prophet.
A prophet. He was a prophet. Yes. And I am shocked to discover otherwise. I'm shocked to discover that you have 100-degree days out here in Central Texas.
I'm surprised that he's still there. I mean, if Discovery wants to.
It's interesting too because Puck News, which I've only just recently become aware of, is reporting that Discovery's guy, David Zaslav, I think is his name, the guy that's running things now over in Warner Brothers, which owns CNN, that they're going to start doing some wholesale layoffs starting next month. But I mean, there were rumors that Stelter's job was on the chopping block, in the springtime, and he was supposed to be gone by June. I mean, for some reason he's still there. I don't know why, but for some reason he's still there.
Well, he's got videotapes on somebody. But now, they're fake. They're fake, Ed.
Okay, folks. Just to make sure that we're clear on this, we are not reporting that. We are merely we are merely having some fun.
Satirizing.
We are satirizing it. Yes. He knows where the bodies are buried, apparently, is what Andrew is saying. And actually, I'm not even sure that that's the case. Maybe they just haven't gotten around to it. Because in the summertime, I mean, let's face it, in the summertime, there's not much need to make a bunch of changes. But after Labor Day, people are going to start paying attention to the midterms a little bit more.
But if you want to can somebody, now's the time. People aren't paying attention.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is that if Zaslav really is going to make those types of cuts at CNN that have been rumored about getting rid of the really hard ideological voices and going back to a more traditional news model at CNN, then Stelter's got to be one of the first guys to go.
Yeah, Lemon.
And Lemon, yeah. So, yeah, I'm a little surprised he's still there, too. Well, let's talk a little bit about what you're writing about, because you've got a couple of things going on here in the VIP section, one of which is extremely popular, by the way. Your Malcolm on the Right podcast this week about woke companies losing favor with Americans these days. One of the hottest short podcasts that we've got in the whole Town Hall Media Group. I don't know what you call it, the Town Hall Media Group domain.
Domain.
The domain. Yeah. I think people are very interested in your thoughts on woke companies losing favor with Americans.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. There was a poll that was done, and it's all in the Post. And they found that the companies, it's an annual poll of the reputation of companies. This is like Joe Biden's plummeting job approval, except it's about companies. And some stay at the top, like Trader Joe's. That's always near the top, and Starbucks moves around a little bit. And then there's some grocery store chains that are very popular. But Disney, oops, it plummeted. And it plummeted because it got involved in the woke business. Uh, the the new head of Disney, Chapek, was reluctant. He didn't want to say anything about Florida's don't say gay law. But 190,000 Disney employees, there's a sizable vocal minority there that felt the company had to take a stand. And so they did, and he became very vocal in opposition to the law. And the state legislature became very vocal in opposition to Disney, a California company, getting involved in Florida politics. So they took away Disney's special tax status, which is worth millions. They took it away, which will cost Disney customers, Disney residents a fortune over time, all because they wanted to get involved. What the reputation of Disney plummeted from the 30s down into the 60s of the top 100 companies. So it was just interesting. I thought that there was such a thing as a job approval for very visible American companies that we all know.
Yeah, and I think that most people are fed up about it, which is the reason why that podcast was so very popular this week. Not to mention that it was you, and that your podcasts are always popular.
Of course. I mean, yeah, everybody wants to know what I think about everything.
Yes, they do.
Well, when they came to me about why would you like to do a Malcolm on the Right podcast, and I thought, well, okay, it's sort of a latter day Andy Rooney, and except I'm not quite as skilled as in being a curmudgeon, but it's great fun, every week to come up with something to talk about in short form. It's only 3 or 4 minutes long, and there was one of them a couple of weeks ago was about summer road trips, family summer road trips, and and that nostalgia about that.
Yep.
And a couple of people, there was a woman on the weekend, I guess she listened to it late, and she was driving somewhere and listened to it on a family road trip.
How very meta.
So, yeah.
Well, so, I should do it.
It's nice to have that sort of an audio relationship the way you and I have had for, what is it now, 3-4 months, Ed?
Oh yeah, I think maybe 6 weeks, something like that. I forget what it is. Yeah, I mean, maybe I should do an actual Andy Rooney, podcast, because what is it about these woke companies? I always just assumed that woke meant that you were just aware, but I don't know. I used to love those Andy Rooney. I used to love those Andy Rooney segments. Pick
somebody else, Ed, because I'm trying to do the Rooney thing.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll stop.
You'll wipe me out here.
What was the guy that on 60 Minutes? It was always it was a Jack Anderson and Sheila.
Oh,
I can't think of her last name, and that was a thing that prompted the Saturday Night Live satire where Dan Aykroyd told Jane Curtin, "Jane, you ignorant slut."
That was a wonderful bit.
That was a wonderful bit, yeah. But I'll have to find somebody else. You're locking up the curmudgeon. You're cornering the curmudgeon market there. But but fortunately, you're also doing a lot of writing, and you've got a post up about Nancy Pelosi's Taiwan visit.
Yeah.
And how it shows that Joe Biden is the diplomatic weakling that he is. Now, I'm actually very conflicted about this, because I think once she announced that she wanted to go to Taiwan, she really needed to follow through on it. But on the other hand, I'm not necessarily sure that was actually a smart decision in the first place, because frankly, we don't need to necessarily poke the bear here, or, poke the panda, I guess, because we're poking the bear on the other side of the continent in regard to Ukraine. And I'm thinking that was the only reason for that, in my view, is that Nancy Pelosi doesn't anticipate being in Congress after the 1st of next year.
Exactly. Yeah,
and she wants to get this in while she can.
Yeah, she's always takes these trips. Remember, she went and had a controversial trip to see Bashar al-Assad, and in Syria with their little scarf on when it was inappropriate to do that. And we had just pulled our ambassador. We didn't have relations with them anymore. Yeah, she's a piece of work, and she annoys people. She has a way of doing that, and she gets away with it because she's in a powerful position.
Right.
Now, my research showed that it was supposed to be a quiet visit, and they weren't going to announce it publicly until she was gone. And then it would be less of a flaunting in your face
right.
to Ziv. But as I understand it, the Biden White House leaked it to the media. And if the president is saying something about it, then the media pays attention to it. And that became a big controversy. And then she had to go, I think. Otherwise, she's, first of all, from her personal point of view, she's caving to Joe. I thought they were in the same party. He was opposed to her going for the very reason you said. He's trying to keep Z from helping Russia too much in Ukraine. But so from her personal point of view, she had to go. But also from a diplomatic point of view, you can't have the chairman in China telling an American politician what they can and cannot do.
Right.
And, if you want to talk about controversy, it was Biden. We've had the policy of strategic ambiguity forever. And it was Joe Biden who just a few weeks ago said, well, of course we'll defend Taiwan. Well,
yeah. So much for ambiguity.
That was a big gap. Yeah, that's like when he was in Poland and he said, well, of course we have troops in Ukraine. No. So we do have observers there,
right?
And they're studying captured Russian equipment and destroyed Russian equipment and tactics, and they're apparently Ukraine has done a really good job of listening in on Russian communications, and this is very helpful for us and for NATO to know how screwed up the Russian military is. And Ukraine has been doing, for its size, it's been punching above its weight.
Yep.
Now, I might share a personal story. I was involved in a visit with Nancy Pelosi. Her daughter, Alexandria, remember her? She's the one that did that little alleged documentary on the 2000 Bush campaign. That little video documentary. Well, she taped everybody talking about it, and we all knew that she said, oh, this is all off the record. This is just for me. But then, of course, she made a documentary out of it. So anyway, that was Pelosi's daughter, and she sent word during the campaign that her mother wanted to meet very much with George W. Bush. So I arranged the meeting, and we did it in the airport in Fresno, and with her and the daughter. And Mrs. Bush was there as well. I got to tell you, Ed, Nancy Pelosi, I've never seen anybody suck up to somebody worse than Nancy Pelosi. I mean, it was, if you were diabetic, you would have a real problem being in that room. She was so looking forward. Of course, you're going to win, and I'm so looking forward to working with you closely, and so on and so forth. I guess she was angling to be speaker then. She hadn't been yet.
Right.
And at one point, I got a strange look from one of the Bush family members, like, good God, what is this about? And of course, George W. handled it very professionally, and he was good working with Democrats. He liked them, and he knew a lot of them when he was younger, and had worked with them in the as governor. And in fact, I forget his name now, but the lieutenant governor was a Democrat. They were elected separately there, and he Bush went to meet him before his election as governor and said he was looking forward, like Nancy did. I was looking forward to working with him. And the Democrat waited to see in the media that the meeting was leaked, and it wasn't. Anyway, long story short, they became very close friends. And in his will, when he died, he asked that George W. Bush give the eulogy at his funeral. People make fun of Bush for working and talking and being friendly with Michelle Obama and all that, but that's just his style. Or he can get along with them, and he got a lot done in Texas with that when the legislature was Democrat. So yeah. Anyway, it was just an interesting story. That was my big peek into the operating mannerisms of Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. Well, good column.
Thank you.
And I'm still not exactly sure what it was that Pelosi thought she was accomplishing with that.
Well, getting in the news eventually.
I guess. But yeah, I think that was her swan song, not just as House Speaker, but basically as a member of Congress. Because I think this next time, when she loses the gavel, that she's just going to resign and let California hold a special election in that so precarious Democratic district of San Francisco.
Yeah, she really fixed it up, that district in San Francisco.
I think it's D plus 63 in the Cook Index, and that means that there's only 63 Republicans in the entire district.
Yeah.
So,
so yes. That's like Wyoming. There's like thousands and thousands of Republicans, and I think there's 30,000 Democrats registered in Wyoming, and allegedly Liz Cheney is trying to get them to switch over, but I don't think even if all of them did, that would be enough to save her this time.
No, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that works out, but I think Liz Cheney is going to be retired.
Retired from the House, but
that's what I mean. Yeah,
he's going to be around for a while. Yeah.
Well, her father's still around. I mean, he's cutting ads for her in Wyoming, so he's not even retired.
And in the ad, he did. Well, I don't remember how long it was. A minute. He did. Speaking about her, he didn't say Wyoming once. It was all Trump. It was all anti-Trump. The worst threat to the United States in our history.
And the irony of this is, even if you agree on that point, which, I'm unhappy what happened after the 2020 election. But even if you agree on that point, Democrats were calling Dick Cheney the worst threat to the American. I mean, I remember when that was an accusation thrown at Dick Cheney during the Bush years. So, it's interesting how politics comes around. Anyway, we're going to have more on all of this stuff next week, because we're going to do this all again next week, Andrew, because it's always Tuesdays. Oh my gosh,
we're going to do this. I think, Ed, we're going to do this till we get it right.
Yeah, well, that might take a while. That might take a very long while, Andrew Malcolm. Yeah. Don't forget that Andrew is the prince of Twitter at AH Malcolm on the Twitterses. He's at Red State. He's the regent of redstate.com. Great stuff going on over at Red State. And Andrew, we'll talk next week.
Okay. Thank you, Edward. Thanks, everybody. See you then.
See you then. Stay tuned for just a little bit more from the Ed Morrissey Show coming up right after this. Thank you for watching and listening to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube to get alerted as soon as new episodes get published. You can support the Ed Morrissey Show and Hot Air's VIP reporting by becoming a VIP member, too. Visit hotairvip.com and use the promo code SAVEAMERICA, all one word, for 40% off your membership. Choose VIP Gold and gain membership to access to all of the Town Hall sites. Thanks again for watching and listening.